My name is David Elliott, 2 Arrows Vanderhoop, Aquinnah, Wampanoag. I want to acknowledge Nompi as Wampanoag territory. I claim Wampanoag territory is unceded land. Today, I'm feeling very thankful to wake up to a beautiful day and to be here in this lifetime. It is time to acknowledge the territory of the Wampanoag people. I want to introduce Liz Villard, an island historian at this time. Thank you.
Friday, November 27th is Native American Heritage Day, a good day to take a look at the myth of Thanksgiving. This year is also the 400th anniversary of the disruption of the lives of the indigenous people who had lived in this area for 10,000 years by a group of white colonists. That statement represents an effort to see the Pilgrims' arrival from a disparate point of view than we are used to, and it's what this program is about. My family spent their summers on the small island of Chappaquiddick, which is located east of Martha's Vineyard. It was generally assumed that except for one family, the Chappaquiddick tribe no longer existed. Our blindness was unfortunately a classic example of racism that is concealed by looking at something from a non-indigenous people's eyes. We did, however, recognize that there was a small indigenous people cemetery on the island. It is located in what I now know was the Chappaquiddick Indian Plantation, or as you may be more familiar, reservation. When I became a full-time resident of Chappaquiddick in 1990, I was bewildered to discover that it had been taken over by the town and expanded. As a cemetery commissioner, I felt it was important to mark its historical background with a plaque describing its heritage. When I began working on the exact wording, I went on Google to check some facts. And by this I discovered what I should have known. The Chappaquiddick tribe is not extinct. And let me say that again. The Chappaquiddick Indian tribe is anything but extinct. There are over 30 members of the tribe living on the Vineyard, and many others living all over the United States, even as far away as Hawaii. Well, so much for pretty much every history or guidebook written before 2000. With the help of Alma Gordon Smith, their sachem, and other members of the tribe, we put together the wording for the plaque, which now stands at the entrance to the Jeffers Lane Cemetery. All too often when I mention this, however, I get one of two responses. They're not really Chappaquiddick Indians because they don't live on Chappaquiddick. Oh, they're not really Chappaquiddick Indians because they're not 100% Indian. The insistence that the indigenous people of this country meet a higher standard than anyone else is so ridiculous that at first glance, it's almost funny. I would not recommend applying this kind of logic to the person standing next to you at the St. Patrick's Day parade in Boston. It is time, however, that we face the reality that these two standards have been used to justify the exploitation, enslavement, and eradication of the knowledge of the indigenous people of what is now called the United States of America. I can think of no better way to start you thinking about this reality than a speech Wamsutta, or to give his English name, Frank James, an Aquinnah Wampanoag elder and Native American activist, wrote in 1970. The following is quoted from a formal introduction to that speech. 350 years after the Pilgrim began their invasion of the land of the Wampanoag, their American descendants planned an anniversary celebration, still clinging to the white myth of friendly relationships between their forefathers and the Wampanoags. The anniversaries planned thought it would be nice to have an Indian make an appreciative and complimentary speech at their state dinner. Frank James was asked to speak at that celebration. He accepted. The planners, however, asked to see his speech in advance of the occasion, and it turned out that Frank James's views, based on history rather than mythology, were not what the Pilgrims descended wanted to hear. Frank James refused to deliver a speech written by a public relations person and did not speak at the anniversary celebration. If he had spoken, this is what he would have said.
Today, I will read to you the suppressed speech by Frank Wamsutta James and Aquinnah Wampanoag. Frank James was an activist and brilliant trumpetist, the first Native American to graduate from the New England Conservatory. He was not allowed to play in orchestras due to the color of his skin and his indigenous heritage. He chose the name Wamsutta, his hero, son of Massasoit Usamequin and brother of Metacomet, or King Philip. These are all my heroes. The Thanksgiving holiday is based on lies. And these lies live on in the foundation myth of our country. A friendly dinner does not do justice to the relation between America and its indigenous people, to say the least. War, murder, rape, and the destruction of culture does. When we look around us today, we see the evidence of what happened in history. Today, we are destroying the earth, disrespecting indigenous ways, and indigenous people like me are the descendants of the 5% that survived. That means 95% of my people were killed. That's how that so-called dinner has panned out. Yet America continues to celebrate Thanksgiving, as well as other holidays like Independence Day, without asking questions or educating ourselves or our youth. It is painful for me to celebrate these holidays. They represent days of mourning and continued historic trauma. That needs to change. 50 years ago, Frank James wrote these words. Listen closely, as not much has changed. It is time that we serve the truth for Thanksgiving. To be delivered at Plymouth, Massachusetts, 1970. I speak to you as a man, a Wampanoag man. I'm a proud man, proud of my ancestry, my accomplishments won by a strict parental direction. You must succeed. Your face is a different color in this small Cape Cod community. I'm a product of poverty and discrimination from these two social and economic diseases. I and my brothers and sisters have painfully overcome, and to some extent, we have earned the respect of our community. We are Indians first, but we are termed good citizens. Sometimes we are arrogant, but only because society has pressured us to be so. It is with mixed emotion that I stand here to share my thoughts. This is a time of celebration for you, celebrating an anniversary of a beginning for the white man in America, a time of looking back, of reflection. It is with heavy heart that I look back upon what has happened to my people. Even before the Pilgrims landed, it was common practice for explorers to capture Indians, take them to Europe, and sell them as slaves for 220 shillings apiece. Now, Pilgrims had hardly explored the shores of Cape Cod for 4 days before they had robbed the graves of my ancestors and stolen their corn and beans. Mort's relation describes a searching party of 16 men. Mort goes on to say that this party took as much of the Indians' winter provisions as they were able to carry. Massasoit, the great sachem of Wampanoag, knew these facts, yet he and his people welcomed and befriended the settlers of Plymouth Plantation. Perhaps he did this because his tribe had been depleted by an epidemic, or his knowledge of the harsh oncoming winter was the reason for his peaceful acceptance of these acts. This action by Massasoit was perhaps our biggest mistake. We, the Wampanoag, welcomed you, the white man, with open arms, little knowing that it was the beginning of the end. That before 50 years were to pass, the Wampanoag would no longer be a free man. What happened in those 50 years? What has happened in the last 300 years? History gives us facts, and there were atrocities. There were broken promises, and most of these centered around land ownership. Among ourselves, we understood there were boundaries, but never before had we had to deal with fences and stone walls. But the white man had a need to prove his worth by the amount of land that he owned. Only 10 years later, when the Puritans came, they treated the Wampanoag with even less kindness in converting the souls of the so-called savages. Although the Puritans were harsh to members of their own society, the Indian was pressed between stone slabs and hanged as quickly as any other witch. And so, down through the years, there is record after record of Indian lands being taken, and in token, reservations set up for him upon which he was to live. The Indian, having been stripped of his power, could only stand by and watch while the white man took his land and used it for his personal gain. This the Indian could not understand. For him, land was survival, to farm, to hunt, to be enjoyed. It was not to be abused. We see incident after incident where the white man sought to tame the savage and convert him to the Christian ways of life. The early Pilgrim settlers led the Indian to believe that if he didn't behave, they would dig up the ground and unleash the great pandemic again. The white man used the Indian's nautical skills and abilities. They let him be only a seaman, but never a captain. Time and time again, in the white man's society, we Indians have been termed the low man on the totem pole. Has the Wampanoag really disappeared? There is still an aura of mystery. We know there was an epidemic that took many Indian lives. Some Wampanoags moved west to join the Cherokee and the Cheyenne. They were forced to move. Some even went north to Canada. Many Wampanoag put aside their Indian heritage and accepted the white man's way for their own survival. There are some Wampanoag who do not wish it known that they are Indian for social or economic reasons. What happened to those Wampanoags who chose to remain and live among the early settlers? What kind of existence did they live as civilized people? True, living was not as complex as life today, but they dealt with the confusion and the change. Honesty, trust, concern, pride, and politics wove themselves in and out of the Wampanoags' daily living. Hence, he was termed crafty, cunning, rapacious, and dirty. History wants us to believe that the Indian was a savage, illiterate, uncivilized animal. A history that was written by an organized, disciplined people to expose us as an unorganized, undisciplined entity. Two distinctly different cultures met. One thought they must control life. The other believed life was to be enjoyed because nature decreed it. Let us remember, the Indian is and was just as human as the white man. The Indian feels pain, gets hurt, becomes defensive, has dreams, bears tragedy and failure, suffers from loneliness, needs to cry as well as laugh. He, too, is often misunderstood. The white man in the presence of the Indian is still mystified by his uncanny ability to make him feel uncomfortable. This may be the image the white man has created of the Indian in his savageness, has boomeranged, and isn't a mystery. It is fear. Fear of the Indian's temperament. High on a hill, overlooking the famed Plymouth Rock, stands the statue of our great sachem, Massasoit. Massasoit has stood there for many years in silence. We, the descendants of this great sachem, have been a silent people. The necessity of making a living in this materialistic society of the white man caused us to be silent. Today, I and many of my people are choosing to face the truth. We are Indians. Although time has drained our culture and our language is almost extinct, we, the Wampanoag, still walk the lands of Massachusetts. We may be fragmented. We may be confused. Many years have passed since we have been a people together. Our lands were invaded. We fought as hard to keep our land as you, the whites, did to take it away from us. We were conquered. We became the American prisoners of war in many cases, and wards of the United States government until only recently. Our spirit refuses to die. Yesterday, we walked the woodland paths and sandy trails. Today, we must walk the macadam highways and roads. We are uniting. We are standing not in our wigwams, but in your concrete tent. We stand tall and proud, and before too many moon passes, we'll right the wrongs we have allowed to happen to us. We forfeited our country. Our lands have fallen into the hands of the aggressor. We have allowed the white man to keep us on our knees. What happened cannot be changed. But today we must work toward a more humane America, a more Indian America, where men and nature once again are important, where the Indian values of honor, truth, and brotherhood prevail. You, the white man, are celebrating an anniversary. We, the Wampanoag, will help you celebrate in the concept of a beginning. It was a beginning of a new life for the Pilgrims. Now, 350 years later, it is a beginning of a new determination for the original American, the American Indian. There are some factors concerning the Wampanoags and other Indians across this vast nation. We now have 350 years of experience living amongst the white man. We can now speak the language. We can now think as the white man thinks. We can now compete with him for top jobs. We're being heard. We're now being listened to. The important point is that along with these necessities of everyday living, we still have the spirit. We still have the unique culture. We still have the will. And most important of all, the determination to remain as Indians. We are determined, and our presence here this evening is living testimony that this is only the beginning of the American Indian, particularly the Wampanoag, to regain the position in this country that is rightfully ours. Frank Wamsutta James, September 10th, 1970. Now, for me, 50 years have passed since Frank James wrote these truthful words, and not much has changed. It is time that we address the truth of this country's history, its origin. Let's begin by serving truth for Thanksgiving. Thank you.
We ain't got no reparations. We are taking back our power. I will tell you the truth right now. been lied to. We've been lied to. We've been killed. Our culture was stolen. When will we return? Remember that you are me and I am you and we are everything. Remember that our roots are delicate, yin yang, all the elements. Blessed by the light of the sun to make us grow. Blessed by the beautiful waters to make us know. To pass on to the seeds we may sow. I am grateful for you. My spirit, I am my spirit, and I remember that I am. I am grandfather, sun, and grandmother moon. The world is waiting for you. My spirit, and I remember that I am grandfather's son and grandmother made up. I'm on a two-man. I am grateful for you. My spirit, I am my spirit, and I remember that I am I am grandfather's son and grandmother moon. Matai, you what kino. Natasuisna nawi, Itia hoka, Omanetong, Onohtiaong, Wahka kwashik, Nini what you want me, Nikona hachik, Namana tumen, Nin pawainan, Naniskia, Way I, hey.